good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Do you feel trapped? Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel as though you're waiting for everybody else to make decisions so that you can move forward in your life? Have you begun to realize and notice that you've taken a back seat in your own life? Maybe perhaps years ago you were a leader in your own life, personally, professionally. And it seems that over time, you've decided to slowly stop leading and let other people do so. And sometimes that's okay. But now you're beginning to do an analysis on your life, an inventory, and you're realizing that your life is not where you want it to be. You're waiting on other people to make decisions. You're struggling to understand where you stand in life, and you feel ultimately trapped. If you're feeling any of these feelings right now, dealing with relationships that you have questions of where they're going, unhappy in your marriage, unhappy in your relationship, and struggling to start the communication, you can't miss today's show. Because what I found is that when we leave the leadership position and we take the backseat role, what happens is we become eventually quite unhappy. In the beginning, we probably took a hiatus, a break, because we were overwhelmed, stressed out. Some of us were never really leading our life. We were allowing other people to take the lead. And now, today, on Live Your True Life Perspectives, we're going to talk about what it means when we're not leading, what it means when we are leading, and how to flip the script on your current situation. You know, I find it interesting when we are not leading. One of the first things that I hear from my clients, you know, being that I'm a therapist and I see clients in my office or on Skype when they don't live in Texas, or on FaceTime when they don't live in Texas, or even phone calls. Because a lot of people prefer to be on the phone with their therapist, which is works out quite well. But when I'm working with my clients, one of the first things that I hear them say when they have let go of the leadership role or never taken it in the first place is that they don't feel heard by family, friends, coworkers, bosses. They just don't feel heard. They feel as though their needs and desires and wants go overlooked. Everybody else gets what they need, and they seem to come up short every time. And I can understand, because I've been in positions before where I felt like my voice wasn't heard, but I realized that I wasn't projecting. I wasn't leading. I wasn't explaining what I needed, what I wanted. And I had not stepped into the leadership role at that time. I find that many of us can feel unheard at home, whether it's with a long-term spouse or even a short-term relationship. Begin to feel as though you're doing everything for that person. Your wants and needs and desires are completely overlooked. And it's an interesting situation when you really think about it, because our family dynamic should be where we find happiness. Our family dynamic should be where we find the ability to be ourselves and to speak freely. And I think that's a very interesting thing too, because some of us find that our relationships are quite out of control. We don't have enough clarity. We don't understand where we're going. We don't even understand what we want out of the relationship. It's almost as if we're in this relationship, and some of you might have this right now, where you're married, and instead of feeling married, it feels more like what? You are roommates. It's become the roommate situation. And when we have the roommate situation in marriage, that makes for a very unhappy and unstable situation. Instead of really feeling married, we find ourselves watching different TV programs in different rooms. We may start finding ourselves going to bed at extremely different times, and one person might be consistently sleeping on the couch. It seems that the conversation becomes lesser and lesser, And it seems like the conversation becomes more surfacey and surfacey as the time goes by. Always an interesting deal. Really not that interesting, and it seems to be getting out of hand more and more so, and harder to understand and harder to get a grasp on every single day. As every day floats by, there's more and more water under the bridge. More and more anger, more pain, and resentment, and you don't feel as though you are heard. And I find that very interesting because when we don't feel like we're heard at home, that's a bad sign. That's a sign that we really need to focus on what we have going on. What are we doing in our day-to-day life? Where are we right now? And how can we make changes to better our life situation? You know, and I find it interesting, especially with marriage and long-term relationships, is that a lot of times we let this stuff fester. We let years and years go by without even talking about it. We out of sight, out of mind, but it's not out of sight. It's not out of mind because it's there every night you come home. You know, I've had some clients that say that there's things that are out of control where their spouse can't stop spending money. Their spouse continues to get them into financial ruin because it's happened one time and they bailed their spouse out. Happened another time, they bailed their spouse out. Happened another time. And it's at the point where it's so stressful to them. They don't know if they'll ever have time to retire, ever be able to retire. And they haven't really talked about it because they're walking on eggshells because they don't know how to open the conversation. But on top of that, the relationship itself is also struggling, not only the financial, but the mental and emotional component, not to mention the fact that the sex component hasn't existed for a very long time. And not that sex is everything, because there's relationships that are based on more than that. It's supposed to be a component of the relationship. However, what happens is sometimes we find ourselves in marriages where it's become this roommate situation because we're no longer leading, we're not talking about it, we're not airing our grievances, we're walking on eggshells, and we even get more and more off track from what a relationship should be. Another interesting, resounding quality of not being in the leadership position in our life is we find that we're not living the life that we want to live. We find that we're actually living a life quite contrary to the life that we want to live. Perhaps we're not doing what we want to do. We're working a job we don't want to work. We're dealing with struggles and stress that is not what we signed up for. Perhaps our whole vision of our life was completely different. Our work life. Perhaps the entire concept of what we were going to do in this lifetime was something different all on its own. You know, I find it very interesting because I feel as though many of us had a great idea for what our life was going to be like, but then all of a sudden, it totally switched up. It totally changed gears. And all of a sudden, we begin to find ourselves in a situation where we're, well, not happy. We find ourselves unhappy. We find ourselves in situations that don't bring us happiness. And we also begin to resent the situation because we feel like we're on this planet to do something much more. And we're getting stuck in a situation that, well, feels stuck. We feel trapped. We feel sad and overwhelmed because we believe that there's got to be more to our life than this. And many of you out there know what I speak of. There's more to life than this. There's more things that we need to be focusing on. There's more things that we need to be creating and doing. But we find ourselves in these same situations, in the same relationship that we feel is dead end, in the same job that we don't understand what to do. We're getting a paycheck, but maybe we're unhappy with it. We're not getting enjoyment from it. We feel as though things just aren't panning out. And we have to take a step back and think about our life. You know, and it's interesting, when we haven't taken the leadership role, we begin to feel like the victim. We begin to feel as though our life is out of control. We begin to feel as though things are happening to us and at us, and that we don't have control of these things. When we step out of the leadership role, we begin to feel as the victim. And as we feel as the victim, we begin to question our entire validity. We begin to question why we're here on this planet, we begin to question the value of our life. And then that's when things become quite stressful, sad, and a mixed bag of resentment and anger. When I return, I'm going to be talking about how to really create that leadership role in your life. Because there's a way out. You don't have to feel trapped. You don't have to feel overwhelmed. And you don't have to feel unheard. It's your choice. And I'll explain that later on in the hour. If you haven't already, go to ashleyburgess.com. Ashley, BERGES.com. You can find some of the latest radio shows and links to the Celebrity Perspective on Biz TV, on Amazon Prime. Also, you can find the link to YouTube, where you can go to my YouTube channel and watch new video content every week on relationships, marriage, and the list goes on. Stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm talking about leadership, being the leader in your own life. Realizing when you have stopped being the leader, or realizing when you realize that you've never been the leader in your own life. Often we don't realize it. We feel trapped. We feel overwhelmed. We feel as though we are not heard by others. And we feel as though we are not living the life that we want to live. And this is very important stuff here, guys. This isn't going to go away. This isn't the stuff that you can push under the rug. This is the stuff that will fester and cause massive amounts of resentment and anger and regret. Resentment, anger, and regret, RAR. Stuff that we don't want. I don't want RAR in my life. I don't want it. I don't want it. RAR is not my friends. And I found that if I'm not leading my own life, then I have a lot of RAR. Resentment, anger, regret. Resentment, anger, regret. I don't want that. And I've realized that many of us, most of us actually at this time, have sat back. And because we feel either depressed or sad, or we feel as though we have no power in our life, we've sat back and we've become complacent. We become extremely complacent. And when we become complacent, we become numb. And how do we become numb? We begin to numb ourselves down. We're numbing ourselves down. And how do we numb ourselves down? Well, I think you know. Alcohol is a good one. Pharmaceuticals is also good. You know, a good helping of weed can also work. You know, marijuana and alcohol and pills, you know. All of that stuff can numb us where we're sitting on the couch looking at our life, stressed out. Not really stressed out, I guess, after that, but not doing anything to change it. And it's all of a sudden we fall into this category where we're no longer leading our life. Maybe we haven't ever. And we're waiting for other people to make decisions. And I'm going to give some examples of that, because when I give examples of that, you'll begin to understand exactly what I'm talking about. It will make it very clear, and you will begin to understand where I'm coming from even more, and I think you already know. But a good example of waiting for others to make decisions, when we've gotten out of the leadership role and we're waiting for other people to make decisions, a good example is you're in a marriage and you're upset. You're in a marriage and you're unhappy. You're in the marriage and you feel as though your wants and desires aren't looked at. You feel as though you're basically in a roommate situation. You feel as though you're walking on eggshells. There's not a lot of communication. There's no romance. And so you begin to think, well, maybe, you know, I don't know what to do. Do I get a divorce? Do I stick in it? Nobody's opening up the lines of communication. So you figure, well, maybe she or he will. Maybe they'll start talking, or they'll want to change things or move out or get a divorce. And then, you know, at that time, I'll just do that. Because that's what they want. But why would you want someone else dictating what you want to do? And what I found is that we've let so much water go underneath this bridge we call marriage. All this water under the bridge we call marriage. And as we let that water, it's going up, the level's getting higher. It's getting higher. It's getting higher. And all of a sudden we're drowning in all this stuff. We don't even know where to start the conversation. We don't even know where to say, hey, I'm unhappy. How do I start this conversation? We don't even know how to bring it up. We don't even know how to bring it up. And we're in a position where we're overwhelmed. We're stressed out about it. And we numb ourselves because we don't want to think about it. And so we take pharmaceuticals, or we have a little too much to drink, or some more wine, or it becomes our consistency. Every night we go home, we drink. Every night you go home, you take a muscle relaxant, whatever you're doing. And so what happens is we find ourselves, whether it's a marriage or a relationship and other relationships, where we're allowing everybody else to call the shots. But the problem with that sometimes is that nobody's calling the shots. So everybody's stuck in this thing called purgatory. Nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows what they want to do. Everybody's kind of stuck. So it's like you have people, it's like that car ride on the way to the restaurant on Saturday night. You haven't made any reservations. You have no idea where you're going to go. Well, where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? We go through this a million times. Every time we go out, I ask you where you want to go eat, and you never have an idea. Well, why don't you have an idea? Where are your ideas at? What about you? Well, every time I come up with an idea, you shoot it down out of the sky. You shoot it right down out of the sky. I do not. That's not how I do it. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay? How many arguments have you found yourself where everybody's like, hands are in the air over a restaurant? Well, this is just a microcosm of your life. Your hands are in the air over the marriage. What do I do about the marriage? What do I do about opening the lines of communication? Can I say what I want to say? Because right now, I don't even know where to begin. And I find that we wait for other people to make decisions. Maybe she'll leave me. Maybe he'll want a divorce. Maybe he's having an affair. This will all be over with. Why would you wait for that when you can actually create your own destiny? Why would you wait for other people to make decisions that you have to deal with later, that you got to clean up the mess? Why would you do that? Why would you ever do that? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, but I find people there often because they don't want to make the decision. They're too scared to make that decision. But the thing is that you can't just make that decision without going through the logical process of how you got there. And that's why so many people get divorced and so many people break up. There's so much water under the bridge. How do you start to go through that? Well, I know how you do it. I figured out how to do it quite well. But many people don't want to go through it because it means stepping up to the leadership role. It means having the conversations you don't want to necessarily have. It means being uncomfortable. It means being uncomfortable enough to have those conversations. It means putting yourself out there enough to say, you know what, I care about my life, and I care about this other human's life enough to be honest in the situation I'm in. To care enough about being honest and truthful in what I'm saying to this person, and to care enough and to be honest enough to put my honesty forward, put it out there, and not have a stake in the matter on expectations or what's going to happen after. And it's interesting. We find ourselves waiting for other people to make decisions. And normally when people make decisions for us, it's not the right one. I mean, very few times has somebody bought you a shirt that fit, right? Or even a pair of pants, for God's sakes, much less making a life decision for you. Think about that. People can't even get you pants that fit, but you're going to let these same people make choices for your life, your future, your life? Makes no sense, but we do it all the time. And so, as you're listening to today's show, I want you to really think how this coexists in your life. And I find that when another point is that when we're not taking initiative in our own life, well, there you go. We're not growing. We're not learning. We're not putting ourselves out there. It's like we've closed ourselves down to the world in fear. We've closed ourselves down to the world, and now we don't want to do anything. We don't want to take any initiative because we're scared if we take the initiative, maybe we're making the wrong decision. We start questioning our validity. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's the right decision. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Oh, man, maybe I'm really screwing this up. Oh, man, you know what? I'm just going to sit back down. I'm going to think about it. I don't know what to do. I'm stressed out already just thinking about it. When I return in just a few minutes, Reggie Harvey has joined me in the studio. And Reggie's always got a wealth of knowledge because he comes from such an amazing perspective. And he'll offer an amazing perspective on this, I'm sure. And I'm looking forward to it. So stay tuned when I return. Reggie Harvey's joining me in studio. Reggie is the author of Anatomy of a Patient, an amazing book. So stay tuned when I return. We'll be talking more about leading in your own life and how you can turn the tables around, change it all up, and begin to have ownership of your life, making the decisions for yourself so that you make the right decisions. If you haven't already, check out my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube on Google YouTube, put in Ashley Burgess, Berges. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been talking about leading in your own life. How do we lead in our own life, and how do we be sure that we're actually leading the life that we want? You know, many of us out there right now, and I know I've been there before, where I feel like I haven't been heard. I feel like I'm not heard in my own life. I feel like I'm not living the life that I want to live. I feel like I'm looking at other people living a life that I'm dreaming of, or I'm looking online at various places, around the world and thinking about going there or living there. And I feel like you're almost stuck in the life that you're in. Waiting for others to make decisions is a big thing that we find ourselves when we're not leading our life. We're waiting for someone else to say yes or someone else to say no, someone else to ask us to marry them or someone else to ask us to break up or to have a divorce. And if they do that, then I'll just follow suit and do what I need to do instead of actually leading my life. I find it interesting, too, how many of us, we don't take the initiative because I think a lot of it's fear. We're fearful. We're scared. Will it work out? Will it not work out? But I think one of the big things is that we just feel trapped in our life. We feel trapped and we don't do anything to make those changes. And when we feel trapped, it's almost like we become the victim in life. We feel as though everything's happening to us. And we feel like we can't make changes. We can't change our scenery. And we just feel like we don't have control in our life. And I think that feeling trapped is in our minds, only in our minds. But that does feel very real because our mental trappings, our mental thoughts can keep us trapped for a long period of time. And usually that leads to regret. It's interesting because when I've talked to many people about this, we all have different perspectives of it. But one of my favorite people with an amazing, brilliant perspective is in studio right now. Reggie Harvey. He's the author of Anatomy of a Patient. He's a survivor of a near-fatal illness. And, Reggie, I'm so glad you're in studio tonight. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, and I enjoy having this opportunity to talk to you this week.
I think it's interesting because I think you are going to have an amazing golden perspective on this, talking about the concept of leading your life and feeling trapped. What are your thoughts on that tonight?
Well, it reminds me of Chapter 10 in my book, Anatomy of a Patient, and that chapter is entitled Hawaii with Cassandra. In the midst of all of the medical procedures and tests and lab visits and doctor visits, I think by October of 2017, I had 65 encounters with the medical profession, and I was just worn out. So I decided to run away to my favorite spot in northern Maui in Hawaii, and I asked a dear friend of mine to go with me, Cassandra, and that was the best decision that I made. I got permission from my primary care physician, but I did not seek the approval of my nephrologist. I was actually afraid that he would say no.
So you were kind of playing hooky there, I guess.
Well, I was, but I just couldn't take one more day in Dallas. So we hopped on a direct flight, and to Maui we went. The funny thing is, when we got to the resort, I had been there before. They all welcomed me and were so glad that I had brought my wife with me. Well, Cassandra's not my wife, but they greeted her as Mrs. Harvey, and so we kept the charade up the entire week we were there.
That's awesome. I love that.
But when I got back, I had an appointment with my nephrologist that next week, and he told me, he said, Mr. Harvey, I was a little concerned about you last month when you were here. He said, I didn't know if I was going to lose you or not. He said, I don't know what you've been doing. He said, but you look great. He said, whatever it is, keep doing it. And I just chuckled inside because he didn't know that my medicine had been a trip to Maui. But you're right. Rather than ask permission, I just decided, I don't need to be here one more minute. I need to do something different. And I'm not going to worry about the risk involved. I'm just going to go because it feels like the right thing to do. And it turned out it was. So I did eventually confess to the nephrologist the following month that I had run away to Maui, and he just laughed and actually agreed that it was a smart thing for me to do to make a judgment call on my own. So in that sense, I took charge. I decided I just needed the air to smell different. I needed everything to be different. And the other thing I learned by this adventure was my friend Cassandra is a very vivacious, beautiful, and successful professional real estate broker. She embraced the situation with me. I was suffering from gout and rheumatoid arthritis. It was difficult for me to walk long distances, and so a lot of the time I had to be in a wheelchair. She made it normal. She embraced the idea. She joked with me. She told me to sit my ass in the chair when I needed it. We went all over the island. We went on cruises. We did everything. And not once did she make me feel as though I was imposing on her or that she was giving up her vivacious life to deal with an invalid. She made it normal. And I didn't know that about her. I suspected it, but I didn't know it. So we had a great time. And she talks about that adventure. She got married the next year. And her husband and I have this joke going. I call him my husband-in-law. And she still talks about that trip and how grateful she was to have been allowed to go with me on that trip. She had just lost her mother prior to that and had not had a chance to grieve. And so in running along the beach in that beautiful environment, she was able to say goodbye to her mother with whom she was very close. So just being extemporaneous and inviting someone else to be a part of my life and to decide my life really wasn't as awful as I wanted to believe it was made all the difference.
That is super powerful stuff. And I think that a lot of us can relate, maybe not on the exact same level, but can relate to the feeling of feeling trapped, but realizing, just like Reggie did, you have a chance to decide, well, you know what? I want to change scenery, and I can either do it or no.
And, that whole idea that I took a risk to ask someone to take a break in their busy life to assist me, and they said yes without hesitation. It was like, oh, sure, we're going. She'd never been before, but she embraced it as if it was an adventure. And she made it normal. So you never know. How do I want to put this? There are people in your life who really do care for you and are just looking for an opportunity to show it or to demonstrate it or to be it. They don't have to say it, but they can actually empower you from moment to moment just because of their affection for you or their desire to be a part of your life, to be invited in. And it's amazing what they can contribute when you just let them in. So you don't have to withdraw inside. You can still say, hey, world, I'm out here. Take it or leave it. This is me today. Tomorrow it might be different. But just take a chance and break the cycle. I think that's the important thing, breaking the cycle, because we talk ourselves into a hole. And then we get comfortable wallowing in that hole, and we stay in that hole, and we want everybody to cry along with us instead of just saying, well, screw it. We're going to go have fun today.
I totally agree with you, Reggie, and I look forward to having you back on and in the studio next week. And if you're looking for information on Reggie, where do people find you on the website? You can go to reggieharvey.net. That's ReggieHarvey.net. And get to my website and get to the book and make comments. Comments are good. Yes. I'll see you next week, Reggie. And for next time, I look forward to your perspective. Thank you. So, we've been talking about this. We've been talking about being a leader in our own life. We've been talking about how to be a leader in our own life. And that's what's so important right now. And when we're in relationships, we can feel overwhelmed. We're in situations in our life, we can feel overwhelmed until we decide to take the leader position. And that's such a big thing. And a lot of us don't realize that. A lot of us just don't realize that it's time to get in the leadership role, realize that we do have value. And I think that's a big deal, too. And also to realize that, guess what? We can make changes in our life. We can do it. But we just have to be able to initiate those changes and those beliefs. And, we don't have to feel trapped, because when I found out that when I felt trapped in my past, feeling trapped did not do good for me. Feeling trapped made me feel bad about everything I was doing. Feeling trapped made me feel scared about my future, and it felt like I was in a dead-end life. And that's not what anybody wants to feel. And I've realized that we have choices that we can make. Some of them can be scary. I'm sure that when Reggie was thinking about going to Hawaii, he wasn't like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. He was like, it might be a little scary, but I know it's the right thing to do. Stay tuned when I return. I'll be talking more about taking a leadership role and some things that you can do right now to overcoming feeling trapped in your day-to-day life. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck. Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been talking about being a leader in your own life, being a leader and understanding how to lead in your life, and how a lot of times when we're in relationships, we might not be happy in these relationships. Some of these marriages have turned into, a roommate situation. Other friendships, we feel as though we're being walked all over, and sometimes we just can't stand up to actually defend ourselves. Many of us have looked toward alcohol and pharmaceuticals to just try to numb the pain, being comfortably numb, because we don't want to step up to the plate and actually have to make decisions. Sometimes we don't feel like we're heard in our own family. Sometimes we feel like we're not even living the life that we want. Sometimes we're waiting for other people to make the solid decisions, and we'll just wait and see what they say, and then we'll just follow suit, which, quite honestly, the last time that somebody went to go buy clothes for me at a store, they couldn't even get my size right. Might as well making life decisions for me? It's funny how we allow many people to make decisions for us that have no right making decisions for us. The only person that needs to be making decisions for us is us. Okay? And that's where the power comes in. I understand that some of us are in relationships. Some of us are in long-term relationships. And we say, we're in a relationship. Yes, that's fine. You need to respect your spouse, respect your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever. But at the same time, you have a voice too. And we really have to focus on the power of our voice. And so many of you out there are feeling trapped. And what Reggie was talking about earlier, I thought was very powerful. Okay? He was feeling pretty trapped. He was feeling pretty overwhelmed with his situation. okay? Many of you are in that situation, maybe in a different capacity, maybe not. But you're going through the motions, you're getting stressed out, you're feeling overwhelmed. Do something. Do something about it to alleviate that stress. Do something to really get back into who am I and what do I want? The last thing that we want to deal with is a whole truckload of regret. Nobody wants to deal with a truckload of regret because you have nowhere to dispose of it at. There's not like a place down the street where it's the regret recycling plant where you bring in all your regret and you get like money back. That's not how it works. It seems like the only way to get rid of regret is by doing, taking care of stuff, taking the leadership position, dealing with the past problems and the issues, overcoming the issues that got us there, letting go of things, and reinventing our new self. So some of the solutions for us when we're thinking about leading our own life and how to take the leadership role back. The first bit of solution tonight is to really realize that you yourself are holding you yourself back. And I'm not being a jerk about this. I'm not pointing fingers or pointing fingers or naming names or pointing fingers. No, I'm actually just saying, we've all been there before, but we got to realize that we're actually holding ourselves back. I've been there before where I'm like, gosh, what's up with my life? I mean, I can't get right, or I can't get this right, or what's going on? And it was all me. It was all me. Now, I'm not saying that some of you might be dealing with some toxic relationships in your life. Some of you might be dealing with some toxic marriages in your life, okay? But if you recognize that it's toxic and you begin to work on yourself and the other person's not working on them and taking none of the responsibility, you've got to do everything to rectify the situation. But if there's no rectifying it, you've got to figure out what you're going to do. This is your life. Are you going to be saddled with that for the next 20 years? And I've realized that a lot of times we let a lot of water go under the bridge in relationships, and then we have no idea how to cross that bridge of communication. Because the bridge has been washed out because there's so much water. There is no bridge anymore. Where do we begin? And so if you're in a relationship right now where you don't know what to do about it, there's so much water under the bridge, you've got to begin the communication. You've got to have the conversation. There's a reason why you're in this relationship to begin with. There's a reason why you're in it, okay? And there, it doesn't matter really necessarily the outcome, but what matters is how you handle the situation and what you do to rectify it. Because, when we do the right thing by everybody and we do what's right by us, we have some amazing stuff happen in our life. But when we sweep the issues under the rug and we try to avoid it, we're dealing with avoidance. We become resentful. We become angry. Okay, not a good thing. When we have resentment and anger, that is not a good combination. It just isn't. And that's what ends up happening. Resentment, anger, resentment and anger. We don't want any more resentment and anger. And how do you get rid of that? Well, you got to begin by, secondly, doing a mental inventory. What are the things in life that you want to change? Where did you feel like you were going to be right now? Were you going to be somewhere different? Was your life going to be different? What do you want for your life? Literally sitting down and even writing this stuff up is so powerful because when you write things down on paper, it really connects the mind-body. When you actually begin to create a vision of what you want, it takes it to the next level. But you have to begin by creating this, really seeing the mental inventory of where you are and what you want to do. And we've got to stop becoming comfortably numb. There comes a time when you got to stop it. It's not helping. It's actually hurting. It's not facilitating a happy lifestyle. It's actually facilitating a negative lifestyle because it's not offering what we want. Instead, it's actually precipitating the problem in the household and the lifestyle and causing regret even later on down the road with the self-medicating or whatever that looks like to not pay attention to what needs to be paid attention to. The third concept that we want to think about is that we need to realize that when we feel like we're being trapped is not the truth. Being trapped is a lie. We are not trapped, okay? Unless you are locked up in a dungeon or you're perhaps, locked up somewhere else, you're not trapped. And I'm talking about physically locked up, okay? And I know our mind can construct walls made out of steel that keep us sucked into a situation that might not be something that is good or healthy. But we have to realize that our mind has created these walls, and we have to take inventory of what's going on in our mind and begin to realize where those limitations are coming from, where they began, and how to really stop those thoughts and train our mind something different to create a life that's worth living. Last but not least is we want to stop waiting for others to make decisions for us. We want to make the decisions for ourselves. That's what a leader does. A leader says, you know what? I might have a family, I might have children, and that's great, and I'm going to be a part of that family with those children, and I'm going to take care of people, and I'm going to help people. But at the same time, I'm going to lead my life because I don't want to look back at my life with regret. I don't want to look back at my life and say, well, I wish I would have done X, Y, Z, or I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have traveled here, or I never got to go to Thailand. I mean, all those things. I don't want to look at life with regret, and I also don't want to blame someone else for not doing what I wanted to do. And that's usually what goes down is when we have regret and we wait for other people to make decisions, we later on get so angry about it, we get so resentful about it, we place blame on them for not doing things, when in reality, it really was up to us. And we let somebody else forego that decision for us, and we became unhappy. And we became disillusioned in our own life. I hope this show has helped you. And in the meantime, check out the website, ashleyburgess.com, ashleyberges.com. And remember, it's time to be the leader in your own life to get the life that you deserve. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.